The day end up in a land I have to play every modern game tutorial, I'm going to for the eternal fire. Now the question is, when the game they stopped trusting us and started to insult our intelligence like we are supposed to be the same species as a gaming journalist? Or, why do I feel I'm urged to throw the monitor to my keyboard every time I meet by another roll of text, or the game will violate my freedom by forcefully holding my hands and dragging me through another painful tutorial about how to press left click in the first 30 minutes or more? Let me take a deep breath and a few steps back to more simpler time, when the first atomic bomb was created. William Alfred Higginbotham was a physicist and head of the electronics group at Los Alamos Laboratory during World War II. He and his team are the creator of the ignition mechanism for the first nuclear bomb and the radar for the experimental B-28 bombers. But we are not here for an history lesson about how we ended up at the risk of mutual annihilation. As head of the instrumentation division at Brookhaven National Laboratory in Upton, New York, in 1958, Higginbotham created the first screen-based computer game displayed on an oscilloscope. Tennis for Two, a project which took a few years to build for the laboratory annual exposition. The tennis simulator was minimalist in presentation, horizontal line representing the court, a short vertical line in the center representing the net, and a ball of light representing the tennis ball. Each player will hold the controller, using them to throw the ball to each other. The ball could reach the other side of the court, flag bounce, or hit the net. Needless to say, this revolutionary innovation in entertainment became one of the most popular attractions at the exhibition, as hundreds of participants lined up to take their turn. Tennis for Two was an easy concept to understand, based on a real sport. Two players will use controllers with two buttons each to pass the ball to each other. Fast forward to 1972 and the same simplicity will carry to the first commercially available game, Pong. This time, each player will control a vertical line to pass the ball to each other, in an attempt to score points by making the opponent miss the ball. Follow video games will retain their simplicity, and every gamer in the making will learn how to play a new title after messing with the controller for a few minutes. In Space Invaders, the player has to move horizontally and shoot the enemies above. The instinct will dictate that any projectile shot by the enemy is lethal and must be avoided. In 1980, Pac-Man quickly rises the gaming superstar as not only its simplicity but its aesthetic and sound design captivated a much larger audience. The entire screen is a maze that the player has to navigate and consume every pill while avoiding the four ghosts. Taking a bigger pill, the sounds will change, and the ghost, now turn blue, will try to run away instead of chasing, telling the player that they are now vulnerable and can be eaten. Fruits that are more detailed compared to the white pills will appear on screen, allowing the player 4 extra points on the scoreboard. Moving to the in-between consoles, the video games are starting to become more complex, with multiple stages, power-ups, enemies with different mechanics, and overall thematic and visual variety. Yet due to limited space and memory, 8-bit games could not afford the inclusion of a detailed tutorial. Instead, they will have to teach the players through the gameplay itself using simple levels in the beginning and intuitive mechanics. Some games will come with manuals explaining the mechanics, the goals, and the stories. But not average gamers will touch this. Instead of holding your hand, the games used to let you take your first baby steps by yourself. Let you fall, rise, and fall again until you learn how to walk. Super Mario Bros. Is the first video game I played when I was 4 on a Terminator 2 console. If you have no idea what it is, then you are either too young or you are born too far to the west. This game has one of my favorite first level and one of the best invisible tutorial, which helped me to get a grasp of the game as a kid who just discovered that you can control a cartoon character using a thingy with buttons, and want to teach me at that time since my parents never had an experience with a video game before. As soon as you start the game, you see a mutated mushroom approaching. You touch it, you die. Try again, you discover you can run faster if you keep another button pressed. You die again. You discover you can jump using another button so you avoid the thing. There are bricks and glowing boxes in the air. You jump, you hit a box and get a coin. Now you get the idea that hitting boxes will reward you. Hit the brick. It moves a bit upwards, but nothing happens. Hitting the next box will drop a mushroom that moves around. You catch it and you get bigger. Now you can break the bricks. A few attempts later you are still big and hit the second box that drops a mushroom. Instead there is the flower and you have a different color. The sprint button now shows fireball, and you can kill enemies from the distance. The more you progress, new enemies and mechanics are introduced. Some are improved versions of the other enemies, others are new. You manage to beat a tortoise for Chernobyl, and this weird creature is telling you something, but you are just a 4-year-old that can barely read, let alone a foreign language from a fiction country that you heard about from the cartoons. All you can deduce is that there are more levels in the games and more castles to find. This can be expected to other games from that era, either due to their minimalistic design with levels that will fit on a single screen like Bomberman, or side-scrollers like Contra Ninja Gaiden or The Little Mermaid that will start with easy levels, then will get you in a loop of learning from failure. Classic games were about trial and error, memorizing patterns and developing muscle memory. They trusted their perseverance and their ability to learn from mistakes and adapt. Their ability to show instead of tell eliminated language barriers, so even children playing the game in a foreign language to them will understand the skills and objectives. Let's not forget the social aspect of gaming, especially before the internet became widely available. Kids from the same neighborhood will talk to each other about things they enjoyed, in this case games, and will invite each other to play and share their experiences. It's thanks to the older kid living a few stories above me that I learned about the hidden on a mushroom, in on the Dash and the shortcuts in Super Mario Bros. After I invited him to play on my Terminator and show me how to pass a certain level. Just imagine if Super Mario was released as a mobile game today. More on that later. Even more complex games like The Legend of Zelda with an inventory system and quest allowed you to learn from the practice without touching a manual. I lived all my life in the Eastern Europe. Do you have any idea how I had access to games when those used to cost merely as much as the minimum monthly salary in the 90s and early 2000s? Cheap bootleg consoles, like the Terminator 2, with cartridges sold at affordable prices on the stalls from the open-air market. For those lucky to have wealthier parents that could afford a personal computer, pirated floppy disk and CDs circulating around neighborhoods. And if you had some coins saved, the arcade machines inside that one grocery store that decided to get them. Those are packed with manuals, printed game maps, and lore books. You boot up the game, and you started playing it. After playing a few games from different genres, everything became easier. If you told me back then that there were printed pamphlets to teach you how to play, then I would have asked you if people need the written instructions on how to breed as well. You can argue that old gen computer RPGs like Ultima were impossible to play without a printed material and a pen and paper on the side. Which is true, but those are targeted towards people with a specific type of autism, not the average gamer. As the order evolved, so did the games. Developers began to include more mechanics. Inventory systems, leveling, maps, ability upgrades, branching story paths, and more. You are still expected to press buttons, die, retry, and eventually get it. Former game developer now online retailer Valve not only understood the importance of an invisible tutorial while creating their first game Half-Life, but they mastered the way of teaching without preaching. The games open with a long tram ride through the Black Mesa facility. You can't do anything but move around and look outside the window. You're getting acclimated to the movement without realizing we're getting bits about our building when looking around. As you enter the facility, you're told where to go, while having the freedom to explore around and interact with objects and other characters. As you progress, the characters will instruct you on what to do next, not in a tutorial voice like press C to push the button, but in an immersive voice seamlessly integrated into the dialogue. After shit happens and hell breaks loose, you have no choice but to move around and observe. You find a crowbar in front of a glass door, and you know what you have to do. The first enemies you encounter are moving slow, and are easy to take down with the crowbar, or with the pistol you picked up from the corpse of a fallen guard. The game spaced out early encounters, giving you room to breathe and learn. Explosive barriers and breakable crates are introduced by placing them in the world, not by explaining them. Other mechanics and systems are introduced in situations where it matters, not beforehand, with an info dump that you'll likely forget later on. Enemies behave in a way that lets you anticipate their next move. For instance, worthy guns charge up an attack, warning you to take cover. This type of immersive learning carried to Valve's subsequent games like Half-Life 2, Half-Life 3, and the Portal games. At no point playing Valve's game, I feel like I was locked in a room forced to do my math homework. The learning curve felt natural, while still granting me the freedom to roam around, study the environment, and take breaks. Grand Theft Auto games are another example. Maybe not as good as Valve's game, but Rockstar understood the importance of getting the player immersed from the get-go. Although 2D era GTA games let you run free and explore as soon as you loaded in, GTA 3 starts with a cinematic introducing the protagonist, the antagonist, and the goal. Right after the cinematic, a ball tells you to take the car and drive into a safe place. The game marks the car with a big fluorescent blue arrow, contrasting the gritty environment of the Liberty City. However, you are free to ignore the objective and jump into free roaming, then explore the city while let Paul patiently wait for you in the car until you decide to return. Drive to the marked location on the minimap and proceed to unlock the safe system and change from your prison jumpsuit. I can start yapping about how my cousin and me left boarding that car for weeks while messing around with cheat codes written in pencil on a piece of paper, but that's a story for another time. Anyway, the next mission will slowly introduce you to combat, first melee, then firearms. The follow-up 3D era GTA games will improve on the same formula. GTA Vice City will add motorcycles to the list of vehicles. The moment you gain control over the protagonist, you're left near a car and a motorcycle. The game tells you to go to a location nearby, but it doesn't tell you to take care of the vehicles. Same as in GTA 3, you can completely ignore the mission and wander around the city, even earn some money by other means and buy properties so you can save your progress while ignoring the story. GTA San Andreas will introduce bikes. and as soon as you exit the intro cutscene, you are left in an alley with a bite and told where to go. Yet again, you can ignore it and start raking some havoc around Los Santos. The only time the 3D era GTA games will lock you in a tutorial with an exposition dump is when you either get wasted or busted, as a punishment for your failure. I have no idea why Rockstar felt the need to do it, but I'm assuming that Satan infiltrated them. GTA 4 is the first game in the HD era. This time you take control while you're already in a car driving your bowling-loving cousin to his home. You don't get the same freedom of exploring from the start in the first 10 minutes until you pass the final casino of the mission. Now the black sheep of the intros in the series, GTA 5. Instead of the usual intro cutscene, the game starts with two of the playable protagonists and their pumpies in the middle of a bank heist. While spectacular, the game is now forcing you on a red track with constant orders on what to do next. In the first 10 minutes, you learn how to use your phone, shoot guns, and drive, only for the game to slowly introduce those mechanics again after you gain control of Franklin. With this, I'm already halfway into the video, and it's time to stop babbling about what games did it right, and try to find an answer to the initial question. I don't want to give the false impression that I'm a very positive person after all. To find someone or something to blame for the ambitious and unskippable tutorials is hard. Be the casual that start winning if they don't get everything on a silver platter. The gaming journalist to give best score for their ability to pass the introductory level. The fact that higher episode games studio gradually got replaced by mentally retarded monkeys more than 2 decades ago. Or the console first design where buttons and tutorials are coded for mass instruction with the lowest common denominator in mind, like your grandpa who never played games before. It's not something that happened overnight, and no matter how much I'm trying to find a patient zero, every time I believe I'm close to find an answer, I discover 10 more potential candidates. Instead, I'm going to point fingers at those I find guilty of jumpstarting this trend. JRPGs may not be the only catalyst for shitty tutorials, but they are a major culprit in normalizing the bombardment with information of players. Some JRPGs can be notorious for their feature overload, often juggling with multiple systems like turn-based combat, elemental affinities, skill trees, crafting, summons, limit breaks, positioning, gear upgrades, inventory management, love points, excitement levels, libido meter, with the printed manual slowly fading away, and the RPGs becoming more complex and mechanically bloated, a need to include in-game tutorials arose. Yet for reasons like maintaining the player retention, publisher demands, or simply assuming that all gamers are idiots, which can find a painfully obvious minimap in the corner of the screen, the developers opted for a more aggressive form of tutorials that over-explain everything in the first hour of gameplay in the most immersion-breaking way possible. Final Fantasy VIII, unlike other JRPGs like Chrono Trigger or Pokemon, did it better as one of the most insufferable early games due to its convoluted and weirdly paced tutorials. It doesn't take you long after starting playing to bump into a massive transfer student. If you're a good Samaritan and accept a request to accompany her to the gardens, you'll get to a terminal that sends you to a different location, and because you decide that Squall is a nice guy, you'll take his time to explain to her how the terminal works and what each location is for, even though you can guess that from the names alone. If you refuse to accompany her, then you can skip to the first annoying unskippable tutorial. Before you have the chance to fight your Force Master, the game starts with a long explanation about the Guardian Force and the junction system by taking you through the interface and explaining each element with a bunch of text boxes and multiple lines flickering on the screen. After you take some steps and maybe beat some monsters, the game is interrupted by another tutorial about the junction system. Somehow, the Symphony managed to skip any of the basics and focus in detail on that aspect of the game. I know there could have been more elegant methods to introduce the player to the combat system, like having a few training matches in class before going to the Fire Cavern, but the game wants you to fight a big horny guy early on, so you must learn everything fast. Then your first GF capture in preparation for the exam will reward you with another tutorial about the GF system, and another about the junction system short after. Having so many irritating tutorials in your first 30 minutes or so, it's a shame, as Final Fantasy VIII becomes an actual enjoyable game after. It's even more frustrating on a second playthrough as the tutorial sections are unskippable and they cover the same system in detail to which you got accustomed the first time you played the game. The game starts with a long cinematic in his Squall, is learning his shared rival Cypher, and it ends in a tie with both of them injured. Instead of showing us this through the cinematic, the game could have treated us as a fresh trainee thrown in an unboxing ring for the first time and let us play the duel against Cypher and lose. Let us form an idea about the combat system before jumping into the story, then learn how to improve while following our training at Bellum Garden. Give us a motivation from the start to get better and defeat our rival by learning more advanced systems along the way, instead of throwing bookshelves on us while being sent to defeat a demonic creature. While there are more RPGs suffering from over-explaining everything without teaching the player anything of value, there's no greater scenario in taking a force tutorial to the other extreme than Driver. The moment you get in the game, you spawn in a garage with a timer and restart maneuvers so you have to perform in 60 seconds without crashing. And most of it will be rolled to just get this first computer and this game from a parented CD circulating around the city. How am I supposed to know what those things mean? I spent a few hours trapped in that parking lot trying to figure out what I am supposed to do until I gave up and moved to GTA Vice City where I was allowed to explore freely and get used to the driving on my own without being confined to the underground until I learned maneuvers that I may never use again. Then I got my hands on San Andreas, where I finally learned about some of the stunts from the driving school, which is a tutorial me play through on itself, but at least you already got the basic by playing the story or messing around on the map, and you're supposed to improve your skills for more challenging missions. So thanks Rockstar for finally teaching me how to play a game from your competitor and get to see the light of day in it. It's amazing how I had to play another game to learn how to pass the mandatory tutorial stage in my mother. I say that learning from trial and error is the best way, but it becomes painful when they equate to a rigged trust set by John Kramer's and paid in turns. Whatever, I read the replay most until the Good Dawn from 2005, then get straight into the game, where I start in the middle of a race with a better car that I'm going to lose to a cheater and get the motivation to start from zero to get my revenge. This is how I start a game involving driving. Throw the player straight into the action with easier tasks to get used to the controls. The same formula can be applied to a game about a Persian prince fighting to save a pretty woman or the war from whatever supernatural shenanigans. Sand of Time is a nice introductory first level where you learn the combat and the parkour mechanics during the siege against the palace. While there is text telling you the controls, you can deactivate it, where reduces frequency if it gets too distracting. At some point, you have to exercise jumping between walls, which can take some practice to get used to, but retrieving the Dagger of Time in the end feels like we have learned it. If this series ever had a spiritual successor, it would be great to continue the tradition of having such a satisfying tutorial level. The time has come to address the Ubisoft in the room. The first Assassin's Creed all considered a Disney into movement tutorial, just the basics. Credible SD tool can move the mouse to control the camera. Ubisoft has shown that I'm as moronic as those enemies failing to check for Altair in the blindly obvious hiding spot, or as stupid as those enemies failing to spot Altair casually walking around wearing his assassin uniform with a sword hanging around his waist. Ubisoft ignores the fact that I ordered a physical copy of the game from an online store, activated the CD key on Uplay, installed the game on my PC and started it. Yet Ubisoft treats me like I've summoned demons, conjured a weird screen in front of me with the game already open and with some dubious devices connected to it, and I must learn how to use this. I get it, you're actually an average guy kidnapped by some weirdos and forced to use some weird thing to access the memory of your ancestors, and you have to sync with the device, while having to learn how to use it, by learning every mechanic in a simulated thought before stepping into the Solomon's Temple. Why not use the temple as the introductory level and learn the parkour plus the combat and the escape from it as the stealth part? You know, similarly to how the spiritual predecessor started. It could have been revealed that we are connected to the animus after for an early plot twist. The only reason I'm not bitching about Assassin's Creed 3 is because I stopped playing the series after Brotherhood and I can confirm if the tutorial is as bad as I read online, nor do I have the patience to check it because the life is too short to be wasted on long and skippable tutorials. However, I can complain about Ubisoft Atari series, Far Cry, especially Far Cry 2. The intro scene is similar to Half-Life, only this time you are in a car ride through the African savannah settlements. To give credit to Ubisoft, the 2008 game still looks amazing today, and having a glimpse of the world is a good start. The first issue appears after you stand up and pick up the weapon led by the antagonist in one of the most moronic display of arrogance I ever seen in a game. I'm not referring to the control display on screen, I'm okay with those, but with this all of text interrupting my game telling me the same basic controls for the most first-person shooters. The introductory mission throws you into the crossfire between two groups and lets you figure out how to get away from the chaos. Later you are given smaller tasks where you get used to car maintenance and driving, then scouting mechanics and planning directions ahead. This could have been a perfect early experience, not different from Half-Life, if not for those pointless breaks and all of text killing the immersion. Oh Ubisoft, you're close to get it right, yet you end with a trend that will plague games for many years to come. And what's up with Blood Dragon? I get it, the joke is that he's self-aware about shitty tutorials or being a shitty tutorial cosplaying as a joke. How about you learn more about the art of hidden tutorials if you're that self-aware that your tutorials suck? But hey, even Ubisoft's tutorial is divine art compared to the abomination born in the mobile game scene. To call the mobile games tutorials bad would be an understatement. Those were weaponized into holding your attention hostage. How many times have you installed a new game on your phone just for pop-ups and glowing markers to force you to tap in specific buttons for the first 30 minutes, while any other action besides closing the application and uninstalling it being impossible? You don't even have the illusion of choice. The screen is a correction facility meant to condition you into becoming an obedient customer. You get brutally pushed through the menus, gameplay and mechanics until you reach the gacha system with a few first free pulls for that initial dose of dopamine. What you play can be barely called a tutorial. It's a loading screen disguised as one, pretending to be interactive, while in reality you are moving on a rail track without even realizing it. In some instances, you are fooled to believing that you played the game when in fact the gameplay itself, but it takes time to realize that you are not in control at all except when you have to close another pop-up window. The game developers are not the ones to blame. I've played and enjoyed every game I gave as an example so far. I can see the vision and the dedication of the people who have actively worked on them. Even mobiles game can entertain you for tens or hundreds of hours if you don't treat them like the job you have to pay for. The real culprits are the publisher or live service game tracking the player retention stats minute by minute, forcing the developers into implementing draconian measures to seize it from the players. This is the spawn of data analytics and corporate terror infected the game industry for over 2 decades. Somewhere in the Dante's corporate dungeon, there's a solace analyst celebrating the fact that 95% of players made it past the pressed forward to move section. We live in the retention era, where everyone and everything connected to a server seeks to steal it from you by any means. Some games don't want you to have fun, they need you to stay until you hit the first microtransaction kill point. They need you to pay either with your time or with your wallet, and the expansive early tutorials are made to keep you on a list so they can suck you dry of engagement for longer. When the windows on the mobiles game are popping up asking you if you are having fun, they are actually asking if you made it past the first hour because the publisher aren't seeing you as a player but as a number. The hope is not totally lost. Indie game developers or smaller studios know better that the best way to keep retention is to deliver a fun product from the moment you press start to the ending credits. Stardew Valley gives you a desolate farm in a lovely village and tools. One of the many things that are separating us the humans from the gaming journals is the fact that you know how to use tools. Valheim will drop you naked in the wild, with a Tolkien rabble telling you to hunt down some monsters, while it's up to you to reinvent the wheel and fire. You get the idea. Despite developers overloading the games with tutorials, players often ignore them, skip the dialogue, immediately Google things, or for the brave or unaware, ask on Reddit at the risk of being punched in the face with snarky replies. Ironically, we have come full circle back to the manuals and the game teach outlines, only this time in a digital format. With that being said, I now need your attention to watch this edit of Super Mario, in which I put some unnecessary and unsolicited effort, and I need to justify it. Until next time, yours truly, Pacifit.